All statements and opinions expressed by guests of the Adult in the Room podcast are strictly their own and do not necessarily reflect the beliefs or opinions of the host, producers, or advertisers. All interviews are presented in their most complete possible form in the interests of free speech. No statements should be interpreted as financial, legal, or medical advice. Listener and viewer discretion are strongly advised.
It's the Adult in the Room podcast with Victoria Taft. That's me. I'm looking forward to talking about voting integrity. Of course, as we get closer to the 2024 election, a lot more people will have that on their mind. And I'm going to be doing that discussion, talking about voting integrity and election integrity with J. Christian Adams. He's probably one of the foremost experts on this issue in the entire United States of America. We're glad to have him on the Adult in the Room podcast. But I wanted to say one more thing before I get into our discussion. And that is a reminder, please. I don't do this enough, which is why I'm doing it now. Please subscribe, like, share to our podcast. It's free on all of the different platforms. And please leave us nice messages on Apple Podcast. And of course, we are here on Rumble, and we are here on YouTube and Odyssey and Spotify, which is home base for us. So please go ahead and like and subscribe. It's free. I like that price. It's awesome for information that's this good. So we appreciate it. Okay. Well, after the assassination attempt on former President Trump, the meme meisters on Twitter, which is X now, set forth. They had a day, actually. And one of the memes was, it was kind of fun, actually. And not because it was having anything to do with an assassination, but because of this point. And it was this. And how to prevent mass shootings, said C-SPAN. One said, make getting a gun as difficult as it is to vote. And the person underneath them said, oh, you want them mailed out to everyone? Yeah, there's that. So, I appreciate that. And I appreciate the sentiment because make it so easy to vote these days. And it's not always for the right people. And J. Christian Adams of the Public Interest Legal Foundation, a legal foundation that does work almost exclusively in election verification and election integrity. Welcome back to the Adult in the Room podcast. How are you?
Hey, thank you. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm doing well. I am doing well, hanging out. It's a beautiful day here, and but I'm of course shaken to the core about what happened to former President Trump over the weekend. And when we are recording this, it's just a few days after, and I'm sure you've had a moment to give it some thought. And I just wanted to get your thoughts because you're like a guy inside the Beltway. You're one of the ballers there. So tell me what you're thinking.
Well, I'm also from Western Pennsylvania near Pittsburgh. So it was, I can't help but wonder what possesses, and maybe my verb is more deliberate than it seems, some 20-year-old kid to do this. I'm sure it's hatred and rage and maliciousness and malignancy. That's the problem in the country. And we narrowly avoided, in the narrowest possible way, a complete calamity. There was a calamity still. Innocent people who were just exercising their First Amendment rights were killed. But what would have happened if he had turned his head back where it was a half second earlier? The cities in the country would be just over the edge. You've
seen that illustration that is all over social media showing the micro meters that he barely escaped with his life. It's just unbelievable. Just absolutely unbelievable. And I'm just so disappointed in the Secret Service. And I'm disappointed even more with the fact that it's the FBI going to do the investigation. Now, you'll forgive me. I am one of those people for whom these institutions are taking a beating in the old PR department. And so I do worry about such things. People who tried to set President Trump up as a Russian stooge, a secret agent, and all that stuff are doing the investigation, who indeed tried to, what is tantamount to a soft coup of the president at the time he was president. I'm not sure I trust them to do this investigation, Christian.
Yeah, I remember I used to be in one of these institutions. I was a lawyer at the Department of Justice in the voting section. And it is true that they're not to be trusted. They're not to be trusted both generally and specifically. At the same time, one of the things I observed inside the Leviathan of the federal government is when an issue has risen to such a temperature like this one has, it is much harder when they're the ones reacting. They're not the ones creating, like the Russiagate. That was a creation of the DOJ and FBI. When they're the ones reacting to an external circumstance, they are much less able to engage in chicanery because they fear congressional oversight.
Do they?
Yeah, they do. And I mean, look, not on every small little issue, but there is a general feeling among the rank and file inside the department when I was there, the last thing they want is to be the story. That's their biggest fear.
Well, they are. I mean, they have been. Yeah, I'm not sure I trust these people. I don't know. I don't know. I've seen too many things. I mean, the DOJ is responsible in their decision making, and the documents case, for example, that we just had some updates on this week when we are recording, are their moves are just unconscionable in terms of raiding the home of a former president. I mean, there were no norms left unbusted by these jackasses. And, you get to the point where you've got the NARA people, the National Archives people, seeking information from the president or seeking a move from the president to make it possible for them to go after the president of the United States on espionage charges and all kinds of other bizarre things. And they're the ones that are causing the problems. And now we have it dismissed because it turns out that the guy who was behind the effort to bust into the president's home and go through Melania's underlovelies is illegally and unconstitutionally named to that position. You're an attorney. You are with the Civil Rights Division. Or you were in DOJ, and now you're on the commission, and you're a big boy. You're a baller. What was this a good decision in your opinion by Eileen Cannon?
I think it's unexpected and gutsy. I will tell you, I didn't expect it. I didn't think, in part because there had been special counsels before, right? It's not like, and so I didn't expect it. It's gutsy. It'll go to the 11th Circuit. It'll take a while to get there and be decided. Now, I will tell you, if something happens with the DC case, that would go to the DC Circuit, and I would predict you get a different opinion out of the Court of Appeals in DC than you would out of the 11th Circuit in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then who's the Supreme Court justice who oversees the 11th Circuit anyway?
It's probably Thomas, because he's from Georgia. It's just a guess. I could look it up.
He is. Yeah, he is. And he's the guy who wrote in the concurring opinion on the immunity situation that, hey, you know what? Are we even sure that this is legally set up? And giving, I suppose, even though it's a 93, well, I don't know. Did Eileen Cannon take his tip and go, yeah, that's a good question? She was already asking the question anyway, wasn't she?
Yeah, and that's where it came from. And congratulations to some folks who are friends of mine at Shar Jaffe Law Firm, I think, who raised this issue. It just shows that, that you got to fight back, and you got to use your best legal acumen and not mail stuff in, basically. And we can compare and contrast other efforts in the last couple of years, but there's a right way to do things, a wrong way to do things as a lawyer, and they figured out the right way to do things.
I mean, you need Wolverine's talons in order to go after these guys. They're doing the same thing back, right? That prosecution. Can you talk about the prosecution in New York? and in the latest one, on which he was found guilty of 34 counts of doing something to rig the 2016 election, but they all occurred in 2017. Could you explain, this was overt lawfare?
Yeah, it's using power without restraint. I mean, look, the basic theory of the case is that the payoff to the woman was a campaign expenditure and therefore wasn't reported properly, and it would help the campaign, and therefore is a campaign expenditure, which, by the way, is a very flimsy legal analysis. And therefore, the failures were criminal acts. I mean, it's like building a tower of butter. Like, don't let the sun come out; it will collapse. It's just not a really credible legal theory, but that's what they did.
Let's talk a little bit about Tower of Butter. That's funny. Here you are recently speaking on Capitol Hill about election integrity, but especially how it pertains to illegal aliens coming over the border on Joe Biden's watch.
Non-citizens are, in fact, getting onto American voter rolls, and some of them are voting. The data show that most often non-citizens are getting on the rolls through the motor voter process or third-party registration drives. Ignoring this problem ignores the harmful impacts to both our elections, but also to the aliens who are caught in the system breakdown. Because they have registered to vote, often at the behest of third parties or bureaucrats, these well-meaning green card holders face deportation. When a foreigner registers to vote in the motor voter system, as undeniably happened by the thousands in Pennsylvania, every American should be concerned. Once upon a time, fixing this problem would have been a bipartisan priority. We've identified 4 core elements that lead to foreigners registering and voting.
Okay, so, and you go through the 4 things. So one of the more compelling issues you brought up was in the soundbite, but further, you talk about it further in that May hearing, and it was, hey, you're trying to get citizenship. You came here legally, and all of a sudden your citizenship is screwed up because somebody talked you into registering to vote when you weren't a citizen. And could you talk a little bit about that and the concern that we have about this huge army of unknown people coming into the country?
Well, we can't lose sight of the fact that the vast majority of people who are getting on the voter rolls who are not citizens are actually here legally, based on the data that we've collected. Like 90% of them are legal. And what happens when they register to vote, and sometimes they do it totally unwittingly, right? Because of the motor voter system. It's a screwed up system. They actually jeopardize their legal status here. So that's why we're getting all this data, Victoria, because they're writing to the election officials saying, please take me off the voter rolls because it's messing up my legal status. So we're able to capture the data of these people, trapped, if you will, on the voter rolls, wanting to get off. And that really informs the breakdown in the process. We're able to see where the system breaks down.
Mm-hmm. Your colleague in some papers that you do together, and a person I know you have high respect for, the Heritage Foundation's Hans von Spakovsky, talked also at that hearing in May about how allowing this ocean of people to come into the country now who are being offered who knows what kind of benefits is also a problem because it does actually change the election. Let's watch.
Reapportionment after the 2020 census gave additional seats to some states and reduced the number of seats held by 7. 6 states got more seats. 7 states had their representatives reduced. But that reapportionment was based on the total population of the U.S., which includes all aliens, whether they're here legally or illegally, even though they are not allowed to participate in our democratic political process. In addition to distorting representation in the House, it distorts our presidential election because, of course, reapportionment determines how many electoral votes someone has. How bad is the distortion? A 2015 report by the Congressional Research Service estimated that apportionment based on citizen population would give additional seats to 7 states and reduce the number of seats in 4 states. Given the unprecedented influx of aliens into this country in the last number of years, that distortion is obviously much worse today. We should provide both access and security in the election process for all eligible U.S. citizens. But allowing aliens to participate in the election process unfairly dilutes the votes of all citizens, regardless of their race or which political party they affiliate with.
True, right?
Yeah. And you know what? It's hard to fix because it's constitutional, meaning the Constitution, when it decides who gets how many congressional seats, is using total population, and not citizen population. And that's kind of what they have to use. So when you allow all these non-citizens to come in, you're rewarding states with congressional representation where there's more non-citizens, both legal and illegal, but the illegal numbers get cranked up in places like California, and they end up in places like Illinois and New York. And so it's a big deal because it affects American politics.
It does. And unfairly so. It's strangling the process to some extent. Do you think that there's no way to fix it, huh? For example, well, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say I think Hans thinks it takes a constitutional amendment, but I might be misquoting him.
Well, you would know better than I, for sure. You talk to him and you guys work together on certain things. And so what I'm getting from you is that, well, there are huge holes in our process and we're just depending on people's good faith for not voting in the system because, as you've found out, there is not a lot of check and balance on the voter rolls, right?
Oh my gosh. That's an understatement, Victoria. The voter rolls are the ball game in places like Nevada. We have 2 lawsuits in Nevada, one against Washoe County, one against Clark, where, remember, Nevada automatically mails ballots to every registered address. Automatically mails ballots to every registered address. You heard that right the first time. And we have found...
California does too, right?
I think so. It might be a little different, but I'm not positive. So if you watch a video at the Public Interest Legal Foundation website, we go visit these addresses, publicinterestlegal.org. Strip clubs, casinos, head shops, vacant lots, abandoned mines, post offices, keno parlors. You wouldn't believe the places that are getting ballots where the voter doesn't live.
Well,
they don't live there.
We happen to have a couple of excerpts from that video. Let's watch one.
Previously on PILF Investigates.
Hi, how you doing? I'm looking for a Vincent Watley. I'm looking for Eddie Asari. His business was listed here.
This has been knocked down for 6 months.
He said he doesn't live there anymore.
It sounds like the dude lives in a storage unit.
Okay, that was in 2020. So you went back and looked for more addresses, and it was pretty disturbing. Let's take a look.
Hi, I'm looking for John O'Connor.
He's not at the office.
Does he live at this physical location?
No idea.
This is my favorite one, I think.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I was looking for Ronald or William Phelps.
I don't know who that is.
Okay, so they don't live here.
At the bar?
Yeah, no. Okay, this is the address we had for them, so I just wanted to make sure.
Oh, God, yeah, no.
Okay.
I don't even recognize the name.
Some of the addresses on the voter roll here include 7-Elevens, strip clubs, vacant lots, Stephen Bronstein, bars, casinos. Look, Nevada election officials are clearly failing to investigate and fix errors relating to commercial addresses on the voter roll. And that's why we're drawing attention to this issue. So election officials will see this evidence that they can't refute and start to take action to fix and clean the voter roll.
Okay, so you've got them at the UFC, and you've got them at 7-Eleven, and you've got them at every conceivable place. Okay, why? Who did that?
Yeah, because, okay, first of all, also the Sonic Drive-In. There's a registered voter at the Sonic Drive-In, and we couldn't find him there. I mean, this goes on and on, like you said. Who did that? Good question. Something is wrong in Nevada with people being registered at commercial addresses. One of the things being wrong is it shouldn't happen in the first place. The election officials should be catching this and enforcing Nevada law. And that's where the problem is. That's why we brought a lawsuit to fix it.
And where are we in the lawsuit process at this point?
Well, I can tell you today that Mark Elias and a whole bunch of progressive groups were just denied intervention in the case by the judge. In other words, they wanted to come in and defend the broken status quo of bad addresses, and the court kept them out. And I'm very happy about that.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Mark Elias, he is the devil. I mean, he is. He's Mr. Lawfare. He is the guy who wants everybody to vote. And everybody legal should vote. Okay, I'm for that, but not anybody else. Not fake addresses. And here's my issue, Christian. Besides that guy, he's just doing what the extent, the four corners of the law allows him to do, and then tries to make up other stuff to see if there's a dumb judge in front of him. But the thing is that I do wonder about all this phalanx of people coming in over the borders who are being sent by plane to different areas. We don't know where they're going. We have no idea where all of them are going. But I do wonder, because there are third party groups, NGOs, that are doing all of the moving at the behest of the government, and they have access to the information, and they know where these people are, if they're not also using their places for addresses where one might receive a ballot and have them conveniently filled out by people who work for the NGOs. Has that occurred to anybody?
Oh, yeah. No, it's happening. A number of nonprofit organizations who try to integrate all of these, they call them migrants. Don't forget to use the proper terminology of the NGOs, the NGO preferred term of migrant. They are helping them acclimate into the civil society, and apparently some of that includes voter registration forms. Look, the problem is the rule of law. This has been a problem since Eric Holder was the Attorney General. I think they kind of started the breakdown. We can talk about the pedigree of lawlessness, but now they've really amped it up, and it's really transforming the country. If nothing else, it's making it normal to break the law, which is the most dangerous thing that could happen.
I agree. Well, what is the pedigree? Tell me.
Well, look, when Obama took office, I blame this on Obama.
And you were there, so you were at the DOJ
I saw it happening firsthand. We had a meeting at the Justice Department after Eric Holder became the Attorney General, where the political appointees literally came to the voting section in a staff meeting in the conference room and told us they were no longer going to enforce the law relating to clean voter rolls. I have this in my book, Injustice. So they're the ones who got this normalized, this anti rule of law mentality that they can enforce the laws they like and not enforce the laws they don't like, or give them political power. It would have never happened before. And even Democrat administrations, they would have enforced the law, whether it was Carter or Clinton or Johnson, whatever. It wasn't a pick and choose. They weren't kings. When Eric Holder and Barack Obama became in power, I saw it firsthand that the law was a mere suggestion. It was not the law. It was a suggestion.
Wow. And here we are. And was Mark Elias around then doing the same thing? Was he helping out those guys?
No, well, not to the degree he is now. He was at a firm called Perkins Coie, and he was on the edges, but he really started getting rough and tumble in the early part of the teens.
But helping Hillary, right? He was all part of the Russian collusion thing. Okay. So here we are back in Nevada. And I just wanted to play one more video here because I think that I'm glad you guys are doing videos like that. I'm glad you are going out and knocking on doors to find out and shaking the trees to find out. Because my guess is there are some people who are living in trees. I mean, in Oregon, they allow people who are live in a van down by the river to use that as their address. If they have a cot, a little bedroll that they put out on the banks of the Willamette River, that is their address. It's insanity.
Yeah. And this is one of the areas that the law is already so liberal and so lenient that, because normally you live where you think you live, right? Like if I think that I live in the van by the river, I live in the van by the river. Except in Nevada, they have a law that says you can't live in a van by the river. Well, it doesn't say that, but it says you can't live at a commercial address. And so why there's thousands of commercial addresses on the voter rolls in Nevada is a serious problem that needs a serious solution.
And Nevada is a very important state, as are all state elections. But in this particular case, I mean, there were some election abnormalities which occurred in Nevada in 2020 for sure. Have those things been cleaned up?
No, they're worse than not cleaned up. I just before we got on this podcast saw an email about the Secretary of State of Nevada, who's the chief election official, trying to intervene in our case, not to help us get things clean, but to keep things dirty. So no, they haven't been cleaned up, and the powers that be in Nevada are keeping them unclean.
That is disgusting. Here is one more of your videos with respect to Nevada and all the chicanery.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm looking for William Sitton or Joseph Castellano. Do you guys know those?
William Sitton passed away last year. I know that for a fact. They're inmates, correct?
I have them listed that they live here, so...
Can I see it?
Yeah, these are the names. Joseph Castellano, William Sitton.
William Sitton, I know for a fact. He was an inmate here. He passed away.
I'm looking for William Bidlack.
No idea.
You don't know him? No. Okay, so he doesn't live here.
This is a casino.
The worst problem with Nevada's election is they automatically mail a ballot to every active registrant on the voter roll. And that is just the worst way to run an election. You have to have almost completely 100% accurate voter rolls if you're going to run an election in the mail. And, as evidenced by what we're seeing here today, Nevada is going to be sending ballots to improper addresses, and we're hoping to have that fixed before the 2024 presidential election.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah. That's a serious problem. I mean, look, you can see the reaction of the woman at the bar. Like, there's no voter here. This is a bar.
Right.
I mean, that's the common sense. Why is the Nevada Secretary of State defending that? I mean, it's incredible. Get the stuff cleaned up.
Right. And under the Help America Vote Act or the whatever
National Voter Registration Act.
National Voter Registration Act are supposed to clean up the voter rolls regularly, and that's not happening because it redounds to their benefit, I suppose, the powers that be. That's wrong, obviously. And embarrassing them, you think, is the only way that that's going to get fixed, or what?
Well, look, this video came out a month ago. The other one you referenced came out in 2020. Apparently, embarrassment is not a spark for solutions, is it? I mean, this is about as embarrassing as it gets. Voters at Larry Flint's Hustler Club, apparently not embarrassing enough.
And of course, it occurs everywhere where there's, how many states just give out universal ballots? I mean, just go to
Nevada's alone on this. They auto mail every registered voter.
And then I thought California mailed out a ballot to every active voter.
Yeah, you may have me there. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah. Okay. So The other thing in Washington State, I just heard about this happening in the last couple of weeks, but it was the Washington State Attorney General, who's running for governor, has engaged in a consent decree with an organization that's one of those social justice organizations, who sued the state of Washington because the state of Washington required that people be in the state for 30 days before registering to vote and voting. And so what happened was, because they agree with the social justice group, they engaged in a consent decree, probably because they go, well, we like these guys. And now anyone who moves into the state of Washington can, they can move in on the day of. They can go to an elections office, register to vote up to 8:00 at night, and vote in a federal election race in there. So my guess is that you'll see lots of chicanery here. Is that unconstitutionally? It breaks Washington's constitution. There are certain rules that are enshrined in the Constitution, but is it illegal federally?
Well, let's. I just did a primer for some young lawyers and law clerks about this, and so this is fresh in my mind. Let's start with the Constitution. The Constitution gives the states the power to set the time, place, and manner of holding elections for Congress. The state of Washington is picked that power up and run with it and done the time, place, manner of holding elections. So this is something the founders delegated to the states.
Mm-hmm. So I guess you just have to solve it locally. But they're doing it. I thought they were doing it under the 14th Amendment because some people had to wait 30 days, others did not. And so as a result, I don't know. That just sounds wrong to me. Doesn't it sound wrong to you?
Well, I think you have to have an election system where you have time to assess the eligibility of the people applying to vote. That's essential. And same-day registration, things like you've described, they undermine that ability to check the eligibility of the register.
In Wisconsin, you have sued the state of Wisconsin, or at least the city of Green Bay, rather, because they ignore the election day voter registration safeguards. What are they doing there, and what have you done about it?
Yeah, this is a real hoot. So Wisconsin law says if you vote same day, like you walk up to the polls, you register and vote, we're going to send a postcard out to validate that you are really at that address, that you have to return or validate that it's really you. If that postcard comes back to us, we're going to investigate you. This is in state statute. We're going to investigate and we're going to refer it to the district attorney for criminal prosecution if it turns out that that's not really where you live. That's the state statute. That's the law. Well, guess what places like Green Bay and all around Wisconsin aren't doing? They're not following the law to validate same-day registration. It's inconceivable. But that's what's happening. So we're suing in Wisconsin, for example, Green Bay, to get them to actually follow the law.
Now, are people who live in Green Bay, for example, who come and they get there at 7:59 to register to vote, are they still allowed to vote, a provisional ballot or something? And what do they do with those ballots?
Well, they're allowed to vote more than, or they're allowed to vote a regular ballot, Victoria. They can vote in Wisconsin with same-day registration. If they show up 1 minute before the polls close, they can register and vote a regular ballot.
And it's counted.
Yeah, that's Wisconsin same-day registration.
Well, it used to be said, state of Washington, I think it was, back in the old days in 2004 when they stole the gubernatorial race from Dino Rossi for, finding ballots in trunks of cars. It's a miracle. It's a miracle. And what they said was, people can come in 2004 and they can register to vote and or they can they could just vote a ballot anyway, irrespective of, when they registered to vote. And then what they can do is they can vote a provisional ballot, and then we'll just hold those in abeyance until such time that we discover whether or not they're legit. But that's not true.
Yeah, no, it's not true in Wisconsin. You have to they have to follow the statutory rule to validate, and they aren't doing it.
Great. Okay, so then you also sued the state of New York over certain things, and one of the state of Delaware. So tell me what happened in the state of New York. Wisconsin's a huge state for Republicans. I mean, it might be in play. Don't know. And it is it's obviously one of those states that Trump won in 2016 and didn't win in 2020. But so it's something that the Republicans just hope and ardently wish to get. But so tell me what's going on in the state of New York. I know you guys.
Well, look, that's a case where they're not following New York law. New York law doesn't allow certain election procedures that the Democrats wanted, but they're just implementing it anyhow. So look, that's a case I think the RNC's brought. We filed an amicus brief, but in Delaware, the same thing happened, and we challenged Delaware and said, you need to follow your own state law. You don't have early voting. You don't have same-day registration. It's unconstitutional in your Delaware Constitution. And we sued in Delaware, and we won. We got that struck down as unconstitutional. We're trying to import the same ideas to the New York case.
Are we ready for a clean election in 2024?
Better than it was in 2020. It's better than it was in 2020.
Oh.
Significantly better.
And in what respect do you?
There aren't lawsuits everywhere around the country breaking down the rules like in 2020.
Because the rules have already been broken?
No, it's back to pre-COVID regulations, like in Virginia. You don't have the same onslaught against state statutes like you did in 2020. So things are better on that score. There's more groups out there bringing cases like ours is. There's a lot of things different in 2024 than 2020.
Let me ask you something. I know that the True the Vote people, I got flagged. I saw this story and I went, holy crap, and then I wrote it up for PJ Media and then you red flagged it and said, no, this isn't true. And the story basically was that there's a statute and a criminal statute in federal law in which I can't even remember what the verbiage was, but could be used to allow people who are non-citizens to vote, and they could just use that statute and say, see, it's okay. And you said that was hokum. But my contention is, here we have Jack Smith using an Enron era, the DOJ rather, using an Enron era statute to go out and get people who, participated or were there, or some grandma out praying in front of the Capitol building at the riot there. And that was never kosher to use. It took us a couple of years to get down the road on that. So is it really out of the realm of possibility that they could point to another statute and go, well,
Yeah, it was out of the realm of possibility. I read the statute. There's also about 4 other statutes what that was a defense. Okay. In one particular statute that bans non-citizen voting, and of which there's like 4. That in one of them, it had an affirmative defense. Now, the word affirmative is important. That said, if the registrant reasonably believed they were a citizen, then that's a defense. That defendant bears the burden. It's not like an automatic get out of jail free. They actually have to prove that for starters. And they have to prove it by a preponderance of evidence, not just raise a reasonable suspicion that they thought that. But more importantly, Victoria, there's like 4 other federal statutes that don't have that defense. So it was not a practical, it was being presented as something that blows the doors down to non-citizen voting, and it's not even close. In fact, I bet you can't find a single person who's ever not been prosecuted or successfully raised that affirmative defense in the entire history of the statute.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Christian also writes over at PG Media occasionally when he's got one of his op-eds to share with the world. And we always appreciate his expertise. And I certainly don't take umbrage at all that, you said, hey, because you're the expert, right? Okay. So you think that the 2024 election is going to go off better than the 2020 election? We can only hope.
Couldn't get worse. Couldn't get worse.
It could get worse?
Couldn't be worse than 2020.
Yeah. Yeah. What was the worst thing about 2020?
That was the lawlessness. It was like, look, all of the safeguards that state legislatures through the democratic process put in place were being blown up. If we agree to the rules of the game before the game starts, we have to keep the rules. You can't change a first down to 15 yards at halftime, okay, for one team. And that's effectively what was happening in 2020 is all the rules were being blown up by litigation, by executive orders, by emergency declarations. And that's not happening now in 2024.
Well, I hope everything's fixed. I mean, I'm sure Mark Elias is still out there trying to switch things and monkey wrench voter laws.
At least we beat Mark Elias today in court in Nevada and denied his intervention. So I have to just mention that another time. So
I mean, good for you. That's something for which to take a huge victory lap. Anything left unasked or unsaid? I'm sure there are a million things, but one thing would you like to tell the American people who watch this podcast, who listen to this podcast, who need to be assured that at least things are better?
The most important thing is to not give up. Anybody who would watch this podcast and doesn't go vote is making a huge mistake. Your vote counts. Go to the Public Interest Legal Foundation tied election database, okay? Hundreds of tied elections we have cataloged, hundreds in just the last couple of years. One vote makes a difference. If you don't vote, that vote could be yours.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Well, fingers crossed for a better election. Thank you. What else are you guys working on before I let you go?
Oh my gosh, too much. I got Sixth Circuit arguments on dead voters in Michigan. We're going to argue in the Third Circuit whether Pennsylvania, and when I say Third Circuit, I'm talking big federal court. Okay, if you're not a lawyer, it's like right below the Supreme Court. Third Circuit on whether Pennsylvania has to disclose alien voting records. We just won in the First Circuit up in New England. These are all federal appellate courts. So just more litigation all around the country. I think we have 19 states we have active litigation.
Wow.
So
good for you. I think you guys are really stepping it up, right? I mean, I see more activity. Yeah.
Yeah, we got to win too. Once you start losing, and we do win cases, once you start losing cases, courts don't take you seriously anymore. That's why winning has always been an important part of what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. So. Thank you, Christian. Sure appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for coming on the Adult in the Room podcast. I always appreciate your expertise. And hey, it's just such a good time with you. Appreciate you spending the time.
Anytime. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Adult in the Room podcast. To keep the programs you like to listen to, please rate this podcast with a fantastic 5 stars on your Apple Podcast app every time you listen, and give me a great review. Plus, of course, subscribe to the podcast. It makes a difference with the big tech algorithm and the big tech oligarchs, and it makes us easier to find. Please get in touch with me on all the big tech stuff. Yeah, we're still there. Using the names Victoria Taft or the Adult in the Room podcast on MeWe, Parler, Minds, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks to 1ACast for imaging, editing, and production. The fantastic song is Gospel by the March 4th Band of Portland, Oregon. Music for Antifa versus Mike Strickland is Ride or Die by Raps by RC. The Adult in the Room podcast is also a production of Flamingo Road Studios. Remember, head up, heart out, and strive to be the adult in the room. Till next time, mischief managed.